The victim was unarmed.
I didn't know that at the time.
You shot him in the back.
He was turning.
Turning toward you or turning away?
Does it matter? I felt threatened.
When you pulled the trigger, Officer Whitmore, what were you thinking?
I was thinking I did my job.
And when Isaiah Williams was lying on the ground, bleeding out, were you still thinking that?
I was thinking the street was safer.
On November 14th, 2024, at approximately 9:47 p.m., 26-year-old Isaiah Thompson was shot twice in the back while walking home from a corner store in Riverside Heights. The shooter was Dale Whitmore, a 17-year veteran of the Riverside Police Department. Whitmore was off duty at the time, dressed in civilian clothes, carrying his personal firearm. He made no attempt to flee. He called 911 himself, reported the shooting, and waited by his vehicle until patrol units arrived. What follows is his interrogation, conducted 12 hours later by Detective Michael Adams of the State Bureau of Investigation.
For the record, Sergeant Whitmore has waived his right to have a union representative or attorney present. Is that correct?
That's correct. I don't need a lawyer. I haven't done anything wrong.
Okay. Let's start with yesterday evening. Walk me through your day, starting from whenever you'd like.
I woke up around noon, day off, did some yard work, watched the game, had a couple beers. Nothing special. Around 8:30, I drove over to my buddy Ray's place to drop off a carburetor he needed for his truck. We talked for maybe 20 minutes, and then I headed home. That's when I saw him.
Isaiah Thompson.
I didn't know his name at the time. I just saw a black male walking down Sycamore, acting suspicious.
What was suspicious about his behavior?
The way he was walking, looking around, checking over his shoulder. That neighborhood, detective, you know what goes on there. A lot of break-ins lately, a lot of drug activity. I've worked that beat for 9 years. I know what trouble looks like. So I slowed down, just to observe. And that's when he noticed me. He looked right at my car, and then he picked up his pace, started walking faster. Now, an innocent person doesn't do that. An innocent person doesn't see a vehicle and immediately try to get away from it. So I pulled over, got out, identified myself as a police officer.
You were in civilian clothes.
I told him I was a cop. I said, "Riverside PD, stop right there." And he didn't stop. He kept walking. So I followed him on foot, told him again to stop. And that's when he reached into his jacket.
And you fired.
I fired because I believed he was reaching for a weapon. In that moment, based on my training, based on 17 years of experience, I made a split-second decision to protect myself and protect that community from what I perceived to be an imminent threat.
Isaiah Thompson was carrying a bag of Skittles and an iced tea. His cell phone was in his jacket pocket, the pocket Whitmore claims he reached toward. There was no weapon. There never was.
You fired twice.
Center mass, like I was trained.
Both rounds entered his back.
He was turning.
The victim was unarmed.
I didn't know that at the time.
You shot him in the back.
He was turning.
Turning toward you or turning away?
Does it matter? I felt threatened.
The medical examiner's preliminary report says the entry wounds are consistent with someone facing away from the shooter, not turning, facing away.
He was turning when I made the decision to fire. Bullets don't travel instantaneously. By the time I pulled the trigger, he'd already started to turn back around.
So he was turning toward you, and then he turned away again.
That's how I remember it.
How far away was he when you fired?
Maybe 15 feet? 20?
The crime scene unit measured 43 feet. That's almost half a football field, Sergeant.
Distances are hard to judge at night.
Whitmore's story has already begun to fracture. The turning narrative is a common defense in police shootings, but it rarely holds up when the physical evidence contradicts it. Adams knows this. He also knows that pushing too hard too early will cause Whitmore to shut down. His strategy now is to let him keep talking, keep building his version of events, because every detail he adds is another thread he can pull later.
Tell me about the moment before you do it. What was going through your mind?
Survival. That's all. When you're in that situation, training takes over. You don't have time to think. You assess. You react. I assessed a threat, and I reacted accordingly. People who've never been in that position, they don't understand. They think you have all the time in the world to make a perfect decision. But in the field, you've got a fraction of a second. A fraction of a second, and you're either going home to your family or you're in a body bag. I chose to go home. I'm not going to apologize for that. You know, people want to make this about race. That's what they always do. But I didn't see a black man. I saw a threat. I saw someone who was acting suspicious, who refused to comply with a lawful order, who reached toward what I believed to be a weapon. And I responded. That's not racism. That's policing. That's what we're trained to do. You find someone suspicious, you investigate. They don't comply, you escalate appropriately. That's the use of force continuum. That's my job. So yeah, the guy is dead. And that's terrible, that's a tragedy. But I didn't put myself in that position. He did. When he decided to ignore my commands, when he decided to reach for something, he made that choice, not me. And now everyone wants to vilify me because, what? Because I'm white and he's black? That's not fair. That's not justice. That's politics.
He was on the phone with his mother when you approached him.
What?
Isaiah Thompson was on the phone with his mother. She heard the whole thing. The recording is 47 seconds long.
I didn't know that.
She heard you approach. She heard her son say, "Mom, there's some guy following me." She heard you shout at him. And she heard 2 gunshots. And then she heard nothing. Would you like to hear it?
No.
Are you sure?
I said no.
The recording from Isaiah Thompson's phone is perhaps the most damning piece of evidence in this case. In it, Whitmore never identifies himself as police. He simply yells, "Hey, stop, get over here," to Isaiah Thompson, walking home at night. Whitmore wasn't a cop conducting an investigation. He was a stranger in civilian clothes chasing him down a dark street. His reaction, to walk faster, to reach for his phone, wasn't suspicious. It was survival.
Sergeant, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Had you ever seen Isaiah Thompson before last night?
No.
You're certain?
I'd never seen him before in my life.
Do you know a woman named Keisha Thompson?
That name sounds familiar.
She filed a complaint against you in 2019, alleged that during a traffic stop, you used racial slurs and threatened to arrest her son if she didn't show some respect. That complaint was dismissed due to insufficient evidence.
I remember that. She was lying.
Her son's name was Isaiah Thompson.
That's a coincidence.
Is it?
Riverside Heights isn't that big. Lots of people have the same last name. Doesn't mean...
Same address, Sergeant. The address on file for Keisha Thompson's complaint is the same address Isaiah Thompson was walking toward when you shot him. His mother's house.
I didn't know that.
You didn't recognize him?
No.
You didn't recognize the street?
It was dark.
You worked that beat for 9 years. You just told me that. You said you know what goes on there. But you didn't recognize the street where you had a previous incident?
I've had a lot of incidents, Detective. I can't remember every single one.
Adams has just established a potential prior connection between Whitmore and the victim. A connection Whitmore claims not to remember. Whether that's true or not doesn't matter at this stage. What matters is that the random suspicious person narrative is crumbling. This wasn't a split-second decision made in fear. This was something else.
Let's go back to last night. You said you were at your friend Ray's house. Ray Hendricks?
Yeah.
We spoke to Ray this morning.
Okay.
He said you were agitated when you arrived. Said you'd been talking about the neighborhood, about how it was going downhill. Does that sound right?
I may have said something like that.
He also said you mentioned seeing those people walking around like they owned the place. His words, not mine. Those people.
Ray's got a big mouth.
What did you mean by those people?
Criminals. I met criminals.
He said you were specifically talking about black residents.
Ray's misremembering.
Is he?
Look, I worked that neighborhood for almost 2 decades. I watched it change. It used to be families, people going to work every morning. Then things shifted. More public housing, More open drug activity. That's not me making judgments. That's what I saw on the job. And yeah, the makeup of the area changed too. But I don't stop people because of how they look. I stop people because of what they're doing. And what I was seeing back then, the break ins, the drugs, the violence, it builds frustration. Any cop would feel it. That doesn't mean I singled out Isaiah Thompson for who he is. I stopped him because, in that moment, his behavior raised red flags. End of story.
Mm-hmm.
You don't believe me.
I'm listening to you.
That's not the same thing.
No, it's not.
What do you want me to say? That I'm some kind of monster? That I woke up one morning and decided to ruin a kid's life on purpose? Is that what you're pushing here?
I want the truth.
I've given you the truth.
Then why does your story keep changing?
It's not changing. You're twisting my words.
I haven't twisted anything. I've asked you questions and you've answered them, and your answers don't match the evidence. That's not me, Sergeant. That's you.
This is the first significant crack in Whitmore's composure. Up to this point, he's been controlled, defensive, reciting his training. But Adam's methodical approach, letting him talk, then confronting him with inconsistencies, has begun to wear him down. He's realizing that his usual defenses aren't working, and that realization is forcing him to adapt, to improvise, which is exactly when people make mistakes.
Tell me about the 2019 incident with Keisha Thompson.
There's nothing to tell. I stopped her for a busted taillight. She got belligerent. I issued a warning and let her go. A week later, I'm sitting in IA because she filed a complaint claiming I used a racial slur. That's a complete fabrication.
You're certain you never used that word?
I have never used that word on duty. Ever.
What about off duty?
That's not relevant.
I think it's very relevant.
Everyone says things in private that they wouldn't say in public. That doesn't make me a racist. I've got black friends. I've worked with black officers. I've saved black lives. You want to talk about the guy I pulled out of a burning car in '09? He was black. Guy I did CPR on in 14. Black. I've done more for that community than most people will ever do. So don't sit there and tell me.
I'm not telling you anything, Sergeant. I'm asking questions.
Loaded questions.
Based on evidence.
Based on assumptions.
Let's talk about your disciplinary record.
Here we go.
In 2016, you were placed on administrative leave after a complaint that you used excessive force during an arrest. The suspect was a black male named Darnell Jackson. You broke 3 of his ribs.
He was resisting arrest.
In 2021, another complaint. You allegedly made derogatory comments during a community meeting, referring to the neighborhood as, and I'm quoting from the report, a jungle full of animals. Multiple witnesses corroborated this.
Taken out of context.
What was the context?
I was frustrated. We'd had 3 shootings that week. I said something I shouldn't have said. I apologized. I took a sensitivity training course. It was handled.
And now Isaiah Thompson is dead.
That's unrelated.
Is it?
Yes. Jesus Christ, yes, it's unrelated. I didn't know who Isaiah Thompson was. I didn't know he was Keisha Thompson's son. I didn't recognize the street. I saw someone acting suspicious, I made contact, and it went sideways. That's it. That's the whole story. I've been doing this job for 17 years, and sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes people get hurt. Sometimes the outcome is permanent. It's not because I'm a bad cop or because I have some kind of personal bias. It's because this job is impossible. You're out there every night dealing with the worst humanity has to offer, and you've got a split second to decide whether a situation is dangerous or harmless. And yeah, sometimes you get it wrong. That doesn't make me a monster. That makes me human.
He was 26 years old.
I know.
He worked at a logistics company, warehouse supervisor.
I know.
He was saving up to buy his mother a house. Get her out of that neighborhood you seem to hate so much.
I don't hate the neighborhood.
You hate something. When did you first decide to follow him?
I didn't decide. I observed suspicious behavior, and
I'm asking when.
when I saw him,
Where exactly were you when you first noticed him?
turning onto Sycamore from Elm.
Your friend Ray's house is on Oak. That's 3 blocks in the opposite direction from your home.
I took the long way.
Why?
I like that route.
You like driving through the neighborhood you say is full of crime and drugs and those people,
I like to keep an eye on things,
even when you're off duty.
especially when I'm off duty. Nobody knows who I am. I can see things I wouldn't see in uniform,
Like Isaiah Thompson.
like anyone acting suspicious.
Sycamore Street is 4 blocks from your patrol area. You'd have to deliberately drive into Riverside Heights to get there.
I wasn't keeping track of boundaries.
You said you worked that beat for 9 years,
I know what I said.
so you know exactly where the boundaries are. Were you looking for him?
What? No.
Were you looking for someone like him?
I don't know what you mean.
I think you do.
I wasn't looking for anyone. I was driving home. I saw someone suspicious. I made contact. It went bad. That's it.
You told me earlier you were frustrated about the neighborhood, about how it was going downhill. You told Ray Hendricks the same thing.
So?
So I'm wondering if your frustration got the better of you last night.
It didn't.
I'm wondering if you went driving through Riverside Heights looking for a reason to.
I wasn't looking for a reason to do anything.
Then explain to me, Sergeant, why you drove 4 blocks out of your way on your night off into a neighborhood you clearly despise just to keep an eye on things.
I was doing my job.
You weren't on duty.
A cop is never off duty.
That's not how the law works.
That's how the world works.
This is the central tension of the interrogation. Whitmore cannot reconcile his actions with the legal framework that governs them. He was off duty, out of uniform, outside his patrol area, with no legitimate reason to stop Isaiah Thompson. But in his mind, he was still a cop, still had the authority, still had the right. And that belief, that a badge, even an invisible one, grants him power over others, is what led to Isaiah Thompson's death.
I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly.
I've been honest this whole time.
If Isaiah Thompson had been white, would you have followed him?
That's a hypothetical.
Answer it.
I can't answer that. That's not how.
Try.
He was dressed like a thug. Hoodie, baggy pants, hands in his pockets, walking like he owned the place. That's suspicious behavior. That's what I'm trained to look for. It's not about race. It's about behavior.
The hoodie was from his employer. The company logo was on the front.
I didn't see that.
It was dark,
Yeah,
but you could see his face well enough to think he looked suspicious. His pants were jeans, size 34, standard fit, not baggy.
they looked baggy to me.
And walking like he owned the place?
That's an expression.
It's a revealing one.
I didn't mean.
What did you mean?
I meant, look, I made a judgment call. In the field, that's what we do. We make judgment calls based on available information. And yes, sometimes those judgments are wrong. But the information I had at the time, the way he was dressed, the way he was walking, the way he reacted when he saw my car, all of that added up to someone who was up to no good. That's not racism. That's pattern recognition. I've seen hundreds of guys like him, and most of them
what? Finish your sentence, Sergeant.
most of them turn out to be exactly what I thought they were.
And what's that?
Problems.
But Isaiah Thompson wasn't a problem. He was a warehouse supervisor walking home to his mother's house with candy and iced tea.
I didn't know that.
Because you didn't ask.
Because he didn't stop.
Would you have stopped? If a stranger in civilian clothes started chasing you down a dark street, yelling at you, would you have stopped?
He didn't know I was a stranger.
I identified myself.
His mother heard the recording. You never said the word police.
I thought I did.
You thought.
It was high stress. Things happen fast.
So you can't be sure what you said.
I know what I intended to say.
Intentions don't stop bullets, Sergeant.
Adams has now established that Whitmore may not have clearly identified himself, that key details about Isaiah Thompson's appearance and behavior were exaggerated or inconsistent, and that Whitmore has a documented history of complaints involving minority civilians. Any one of these could be explained away. Together they suggest something far more troubling. But Adams isn't finished. The most critical question still hasn't been asked.
I want to go back to the moment you pulled the trigger. You said you believed he was reaching for a weapon.
Yes.
You were 43 feet away.
We've been over this.
It was dark.
Yes.
He was wearing dark clothing.
Yes, I couldn't. That's the point.
So how could you see what he was reaching for?
I couldn't see, so I had to assume the worst.
You assumed he had a gun.
I assumed he had something that could hurt me,
Based on what?
based on the totality of the situation.
Which are?
A person of color, no. A man in a high crime area, late at night, refusing to comply, reaching into his jacket. That's threat assessment.
You said a black male and then corrected yourself.
Slip of the tongue.
Was it?
What do you want from me? You want me to say I acted because of who he was? Fine, I noticed it. Anyone with experience would. Context matters. Time, location, behavior, all of it. That doesn't make it prejudice. That's how you stay alive in this job. I've got 27 years on the force, detective. 27 years of making it home. 27 years of making it home to my wife and kids. And I'm not going to apologize for doing what I had to do to keep doing that. You can call it racism if you want. I call it survival. And I think if you were in my shoes, you'd do the exact same thing. You look at somebody and you make a calculation. What's the risk? What's the threat? And you act accordingly. That's not hate. That's evolution. It's in our DNA. We see someone who looks different, who acts different, and we get cautious. That doesn't make me a bad person. That makes me a person. And Isaiah Thompson, look, I feel bad about what happened, I do. But he could have stopped. He could have put his hands up. He could have done any number of things differently, and we wouldn't be here right now. So don't put this all on me. He made choices too.
He was on the phone with his mother.
You said that.
She told him to run. She heard a strange man yelling at her son on a dark street, and she told him to run because she was afraid for his life. And she was right to be afraid.
I didn't know that.
Does it matter?
It might have.
Would you have done anything differently?
I don't know.
I think you do. I think you knew exactly what you were doing when you drove through that neighborhood. I think you saw a young black man, and you followed him because that's what you've been doing for years, looking for reasons to confront people who look like him. And when he didn't stop, when he didn't defer to your authority, you got angry, and you shot him. Not because you were afraid, because you were offended.
That's not true.
Then why did you fire twice?
To neutralize the threat.
After the first shot, he was falling. The second shot hit him while he was on the ground. The medical examiner says the angle of the second wound is consistent with someone who was already down. You stood over him and shot him again.
I didn't. I don't remember that.
You don't remember?
It happened fast.
You remembered everything else in perfect detail.
I was scared, okay? I was so goddamn scared. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to kill somebody? I've been carrying a gun for 27 years and I've never done this before. And now my whole life is ruined because some kid didn't have the sense to just stop when I told him to stop.
His life is ruined too.
I know.
Do you actually know? Or are you just saying that?
I don't know. I don't know anymore.
This is the moment Adams has been building toward. Not a clean confession, but something more important, an admission of doubt. For the first time, Whitmore's certainty has cracked. The narrative of the justified shooting, the trained response, the split-second decision, all of it is falling apart. What's left is a man who did something terrible and is only now beginning to understand what that means.
When you were standing over him after the second shot, what did you do?
I called 911.
Before that,
I checked to see if he was still a threat.
was he?
No, he was... No.
Did you render aid?
I wasn't sure what to do.
You've been trained in first aid.
I know.
Why didn't you help him?
I don't know.
Was he still alive when you called 911?
I think so.
When you pulled the trigger, Officer Whitmore, what were you thinking?
I was thinking I did my job.
And when Isaiah Williams was lying on the ground, bleeding out, were you still thinking that?
I was thinking the street was safer.
The coroner says he bled out in approximately 4 minutes. EMS arrived in 7. If you had applied pressure to the wounds,
I know. Look, I didn't want to touch him, okay? Is that what you want to hear? I didn't want to put my hands on him. I didn't. I couldn't. I just stood there and I watched him die, and I didn't do anything because I couldn't make myself touch him.
why?
I don't know.
I think you do.
Maybe I do.
Sergeant Whitmore, is there anything else you want to tell me?
I recognized him.
What?
The kid, Isaiah Thompson. I recognized him from before, from his mother's complaint. I saw his picture in the file, and when I drove by him last night, I knew who he was. I knew exactly who he was.
And you followed him anyway. You followed him because you knew who he was.
I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I just wanted to talk to him, to tell him his mother was wrong about me, that I'm not what she said I was. But he ran, and I got angry, and then everything just happened.
So you shot him because he ran from you.
I shot him because
Because what?
he looked at me like I was nothing, like I was dirt. And I'm not nothing. I'm not. I dedicated my whole life to protecting people, and he looked at me like I was the bad guy. And that wasn't fair. That wasn't fair.
And there it is, not fear, not self-defense, wounded pride. Dale Whitmore killed Isaiah Thompson because a 26-year-old man didn't show him the respect he felt entitled to, because being looked at the wrong way was, in his mind, a threat that deserved a lethal response. The investigation will continue. Charges will be filed. But the truth of what happened on Sycamore Street is now on the record. A man with a badge and a gun and 27 years of accumulated grievance met a young man who just wanted to go home, and only one of them survived.
Sergeant Dale Whitmore, you're being charged with second-degree murder in the death of Isaiah Thompson.
I'm not a murderer.
That's for a jury to decide. Sergeant Dale Whitmore, you're being charged with second-degree murder in the death of Isaiah Thompson.
I'm not a murderer.
That's for a jury to decide.
They'll have a hard time convicting me. They usually do in cases like this.
Maybe, maybe not. Times are changing, Sergeant.
Not fast enough.
No, not fast enough.
Dale Whitmore was convicted of second-degree murder 9 months later, following one of the first federal civil rights trials against a police officer in the state's history. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Keisha Thompson spoke at his sentencing hearing. She said, "My son's life mattered. Every life matters. And until we believe that, really believe it, nothing will change." Whitmore showed no visible reaction to her words.